Hello and welcome to another live edition of Wrestling with Johners, episode 190. Can you believe that? That's phenomenal. Obviously part of the Johners podcasting network, and got a fantastic guest with me tonight, all the way from Chicago, hot off the heels of a fantastic Chicagoland Championship Wrestling show last night. Steve Ahrendt. Steve, a privilege and a pleasure to speak to you on the Wrestling with Johners podcast. I know we've messaged for a while now, but this is the first time we've actually spoke face to face. How are you, my friend?
Well, you know what? I'm so excited to be here. We are so excited to be part of the network. So to actually be on it and be part of one of your shows is a treat for me. I'm a little banged up from last night's show. We'll talk about that as things go on. But
we will.
You know what? When you wake up in a flower bed and you don't know where you are, I guess you had a good show.
Well, yes, absolutely. And that's one hell of a way to open an episode of Wrestling with Johners. But for the next 45 minutes to an hour or so, we'll be talking to Steve Ahrendt about his journey in the wrestling business, essentially. Bringing us right up to speed, but looking back at his wrestling fandom, how he got started in the media business, eventually becoming a commentator, and all the various roles that he carries out within the wrestling business and his duties. And he's one of the busiest men I know in the wrestling business with his shows and being a general manager of CSW, of course, but we'll get into all of that. But please send us your comments, send us your questions for Steve. We'll be happy to answer them live on air. Yes, exactly. We got to look out for the non-PG ones because it's not quite 9 o'clock over here in the UK yet. But we want your questions, we want your comments. Please send them along. But in order for us to show within your comments your name and your picture, please grant StreamYard, who are broadcasting this live stream, permission to show us your name. Just simply go to streamyard.com/Facebook, and that will do the trick. But Steve, first of all, you kind of touched on it at the top of the broadcast. Last night was another fantastic night. The latest edition of Grapple Masters, Saturday Night Grapple Masters, no less, from Chicagoland Championship Wrestling. You're hot off the heels. You had a busy night. You had quite a traumatic night by the sounds of it, or certainly the end of it. But tell us how it went for you. Without giving anything away, of course, what was the action like? What was the atmosphere like? Give us your take on how last night went down.
Well, I'll tell you this. For those of you that have seen the original episode of Grapple Masters from last year, you have a certain expectation as for what it should look like, what it will look like, what it'll be like with the action that we provide. And as you know, John Bullard is essentially the Harry Potter wizard of independent wrestling in Chicago. So fortunately we get to hang out at the castle with the wizard. It was spectacular. So if you enjoyed Grapple Masters Volume 1, this one took things and basically threw everything in a blender, and we don't know which side is up, which side is down. And like I said, a lot of us went in there in a certain way and left changed, myself included.
Yeah, absolutely. And yesterday was your birthday, no less. So an extra bit of icing on the cake, no pun intended. But did it add a bit of extra energy behind the comedy booth and the commentary booth? It probably was a comedy booth as well, wasn't it? But did it add a little bit of energy behind the booth with you and Joey?
You know what? We had a lot of fun. Joey, a true professional, Roxy Hart, the villainess, also a professional. We all sat there on commentary and had a great time. The entire show was electric, match after match of stellar action, like I've never seen before. And then if you could just eliminate, the last 8 minutes of the broadcast and the ensuing night that happened, it was an excellent night for everybody, including me. At the end, not so great. You'll see it go down, but the good guys don't always win, unfortunately.
Yeah, we got some comments that have come in already. Close friend of yours and mine, DDJ, from What Do You Say with DDJ? Hey Steve, how much of a voice do you have left after last night?
Well, you know what? I'm still talking, so I've got something left in the tank. It's not the voice so much. I didn't really speak after we went off the air for about 18 hours because I was bound, gagged, and locked in a trunk. So I didn't really say anything to any great degree until the tape was removed this morning in my front yard. So I'm feeling okay voice-wise, but some bad things happened after we went off the air that not great.
Can you reveal who was behind that attack then, Steve?
Well, you know what? I have so many people in CCW that seem to have an issue with the way things are done on the Power Hour and on commentary. So, it was like, this might be dating me, but there was a TV show in the 70s called Dallas, and there was a big cliffhanger who shot JR. So that's what we have right now. I'm JR. I didn't get shot. I got abducted, and everybody wants to know who. I'll tease it. Let me just say, I basked in the purple rain.
There we go. We'll have to leave it there with that little clue, but I'm sure we will get to see, and when we eventually get to see Grapple Masters, Saturday Night Grapple Masters on Fight TV or Amazon Prime, I'm sure that we will kind of, all will be revealed. Another quick comment from DDJ. It was a phenomenal show last night. Of course, he was there speaking to you guys, doing backstage reports. And I know from seeing the photos on DDJ's Facebook, he had a fantastic time. But let's talk a little bit about your journey with Chicagoland Championship Wrestling then, Steve, because, they've only done 2 shows, both excellent shows. The first one I watched twice over, back to back, because it was that good. And let's talk about the awesomeness that is John Bullard. When did you first kind of come into contact and was introduced to John? And how did that lead to your relationship and your duties as a commentator with CCW then, Steve?
Excellent question. I met John backstage at another promotion. He and I worked a couple of shows together. We did, I didn't really know him spectacularly well, but I knew him enough to say hello. I knew him enough to engage in comments with him backstage as we waited to do our business for our respective roles at the show. And, I heard through the grapevine that Chicagoland Championship Wrestling was going to be his baby. And, I'd heard stories about what he had done in Kentucky and some of the things that he had done in the past. So, obviously when any promotion shows up in my area, it's going to intrigue me because, I'm going to either be competing against it directly or I will end up working there. At least that's the way it's been. So, I was very excited to see what it was. And, he started to put together the roster and, he had the Villain on commentary. C-Red was, I think, his first signing. So, he had all these great people in place. You bring in Marche Rocket, you bring in Shogun Chris Logan. I mean, he basically lined the streets with, premier talent. So, when I heard about all these signings, I knew it was going to be good. So I didn't want to compete with John Bullard. I wanted to work for John Bullard. So, I waited a while and I'm like, well, I wonder who he's going to get to do commentary with Roth. C-Red does really great commentary. I don't know if everybody knows that. So I kind of thought him being the first signee, he and Roth were probably going to do commentary. So I wasn't overly optimistic about my chances. And then we had a quick chat one day and I talked to him, kind of engaged in conversation about what was going on in wrestling and what I was doing at CSW. And then a few days later, he asked me to join the family. Pleasant surprise for me. And, it's been history making. It's changed a lot of lives in CCW, mine included.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned Joey Roth there, your commentary partner for CCW. I'm not sure if you ever worked with Joey before CCW, but the chemistry that you two have behind the desk, you two have gelled almost instantly, really, haven't you? And obviously you had your second spell with Joey last night behind the desk for CCW. Tell us about your friendship with Joey, how that all came about, and about your connection behind the booth.
Well, I'll tell you, Joey Roth is a consummate professional. You like him or you don't like him as a wrestling fan, because it goes both ways, him being the villain and a esteemed champion in his mind. So he's a pro. So when I found out I was going to be working with him, I'm like, well, this is going to be a piece of cake. The man is as entertaining as it comes. I'm just going to have to show up and say a few things. And, he's going to take care of a lot of the heavy lifting. I had known Joey for quite a few years. I had worked in a couple of promotions with him, behind the scenes and on commentary, and I'd followed his career because he's one heck of an interesting guy. I met him personally for the first time on a Christmas celebration for a podcast show that we had both been guests on called The Morning After with Max and Rion. Right. That's Max Holiday and Rion Skills. And we talked a little bit at this party. And then we talked again a couple of times at various promotions. So I think we had a comfort level already. And then, he's an entertainer. I think of myself to some degree as an entertainer. So when you have two guys that grew up, idolizing Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby Heenan, Jerry Lawler, Jim Ross, I mean, all we're doing is giving our latest interpretation of what we've seen and been a fan of, forever. That's really how commentary works. You find somebody who you respected and you enjoyed that turns you on as a fan, and you try to, bring some of that energy. And Joey is just a joy to work with. Total pro.
Yeah. And speaking of kind of like inspirations behind the desk, behind the microphone, do you have any like announcing or commentary heroes that have inspired you that you've maybe watched and studied to help your performance behind the microphone there, Steve?
That's a great question for a number of reasons. Commentary on wrestling is a subtle necessity. When commentary is not good, even if the show is great, it can really suffer in the end. And I've watched it my whole life as a fan. I mean, I was spoiled. When I started watching wrestling, you had Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan. You had Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura. I mean, they led the way. I mean, they were entertaining, charismatic, and, sometimes it didn't even matter what was going on in the ring. You were listening to them bicker back and forth, and to me, that was every bit as important as the figure four leg lock and the double axe handle off the top rope. So, commentary, I think, although, some people think of it's kind of a joke, and some people are like, well, it's not really that important. It's off the top rope. That's all that matters. So many aspects are important when you put a product out there. So, the greats, I've been watching the greats since I was 14. Like I said, Gorilla, Jesse, Vince McMahon, when he was a commentary, was damn good. Bischoff and Shivani made me flip over to WCW from being a longtime WWF fan. So, without Bischoff and Shivani, the Monday Night Wars would not have been nearly as good as they were. And now, we're blessed. I mean, and then the Attitude Era with Jim Ross, Jim Ross is my, commentary idol, if you will. The first wrestling gig I ever did, I basically was talking about slobber knockers and my God, this man has children for 3 hours because I didn't know any better. So, Jim Ross, and now on AEW with Ross and Shivani together, I mean, that to me is Valhalla. So, yes, I have many inspirations, and, it makes me want to do this more because I want to be as good as them.
Yeah, and you've obviously developed your own style over the years as well, Steve. But where did your style kind of originate? I mean, take us back to I think you went to media school, didn't you, 7 or 8 years ago? Yep. How did that kind of transpire? Because that was kind of your first toe in the water to commentating, which eventually led to the wrestling business. But what inspired that kind of step into the world of media?
Well, that's a funny story, and I'll quote C. Red. Here's the funny part, since he says that at least 3 times every show we do. I did not get into broadcasting to be a wrestling commentator. In no way was that my goal. I went into broadcasting because I thought I wanted to do baseball play-by-play and sports radio here in Chicago. When you drive to work and you have a regular, 9 to 5 job, or in my case, 7 to 6, you listen to the sports radio in the morning, you listen to it coming home. And, in Chicago, we got a lot of sports here. We've got a lot of interest there. I'm certainly interested in it. So I'm listening to talk radio quite a bit. So I wanted to go and be a sports radio commentator because I thought I was better and more knowledgeable than most of the people that I was listening to. So I went there and I did my time there. So opportunities are few and far between for a middle-aged man, because when I started doing this, I was 43. Wasn't exactly inspired in my 20s to do such a thing. A little introverted at the time. So inspiration didn't hit me till middle age. And, some people will buy a jet ski or take a vacation. I decided I'm going to go be a broadcaster. So my midlife crisis had a different incarnation than most. I should have bought the damn house in Michigan on the lake, but that's neither here nor there. So we're at the school, and the school had a contract with a wrestling company, and the wrestling company had broadcasters at our school that they liked. Well, one of our guys that they usually used was sick. And my program director at the time, named Pete Ferrari, said, hey, I got this guy in the new class that is a big wrestling fan. I think he could probably sub for one night. So there I went to Midlothian, Illinois to do commentary for PCW. Which was a big promotion at that time. And, there were probably 500 people in that arena. It was a really good crowd. I had never seen anything like it. I'd only been to independent wrestling in the area a couple of times and not in many years. So I'm there and I'm like, well, what the hell am I going to do? So basically, I started thinking about Jim Ross, and everything I'm doing is I'm doing Jim Ross one-liners. My God, this man has a family. My God, it's a slobber knocker. Oh my God, he's dead. So I was Jim Rossing.
That was good, by the way. That was very good.
Thank you. And a couple of the wrestlers in the locker room came up and said, dude, stop imitating Jim Ross. And I'm like, I don't know anything else. So I got through that event, and I'm like, well, they're never going to have me back again. They hate me. A week later, I get called into the program director's office, and they said, well, they want you back next month. And in fact, they want you to do this regularly for them. And thus they sucked me in. And here I sit in 2021, still screaming at the top of my lungs, trying to be Jim Ross.
Oh, absolutely. And you've obviously, like I say, developed your own persona behind the microphone and developed the voice as well, I should imagine. But take us all the way back even further to Steve Ahrendt, the wrestling fan then. You mentioned the golden age of wrestling, the kind of early to mid 80s. Was that what sucked you in? Was that the era that really drew you in as a fan? As a young fan, I'm guessing.
Well, you know what? When you're a 14-year-old kid and what's going on in the world, you're very impressionable. And in 1982, when I was 12, 81, when I was 11, the world got exposed to MTV. And MTV, once it was out there, I mean, all we wanted to see were music videos. I wanted to see how many times I could see Rick Springfield, Jesse's Girl in one day. So I watched MTV a lot as a kid. And if you remember at that time, WWE kind of partnered up with Cyndi Lauper, and they had the whole rock and wrestling thing. And it was Wendy Richter versus the Fabulous Moolah with Cyndi Lauper in her corner, and Hulk Hogan was fighting in that match. And it was going to be rock and wrestling on MTV, which spawned WrestleMania 1. So I saw all of this on MTV, and I'm like, oh my God, that's Thunderlips from Rocky. So everything that got me into wrestling was because of other pop culture phenomena that, obviously MTV. I mean, everybody loves Rocky. Stallone was a god back in the 80s. And here's Thunderlips, and he's towering over Rocky. And you're like, there's no human being that's bigger than Rocky. And then there's this behemoth. Who is this? And then all of a sudden there he is on MTV. But that's Thunderlips. So from that moment, I was sucked in. And then WrestleMania 1, and then WrestleMania 2 in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
William Perry of the Chicago Bears, the Super Bowl champions, in a damn battle royal. I mean, it's like they're making this script just for me in Chicago. So, it was easy to fall hard and fall fast for the WWE. And I became a Hulkamaniac. I was Hulkamaniac since I started watching this thing. Saturday Night's Main Event, the Hart Foundation, and the Honky Tonk Man break a guitar over Macho Man's head. Liz runs in the back, strap broken, goes and gets Hogan. The Mega Powers are formed. I mean, my God, this is George Lucas-esque storytelling. So, I'm all in, and I just kept watching, and it just kept going year after year after year, and I never looked back.
Yeah, 100%. And if you had to kind of tell our kind of audience, who would be your favourite wrestler of all time? And I hate to put you on the spot there, Steve. And I know if anybody were to ask me, I'd probably change my answer on a daily basis. But did you have like a number one kind of wrestler of all time on your list?
That's a question, and it's almost as unfair as asking somebody, hey, what's your favorite song? Because your favorite song changes over the years. When I was a kid and Hulk Hogan was larger than life, I mean, I was a Hulk. I mean, I wore a red and yellow boa and a bandana in my tuxedo at my wedding and came into Real American, and my wife won't ever let me forget that. I'm not releasing that document. You're not seeing that video. It's never happening. But it happened. That's how important wrestling is to me. It figured into my marriage in a certain way. So Hogan, of course, you go along the years and so many. I mean, The Rock captivated me in the Attitude Era like no other. I mean, right now, to me, the best out there, and everybody would love to say Kenny Omega, but I mean, wrestling to me right now wouldn't be as entertaining as it is without Jericho. I think Jericho, I can't, if I had to pick my favorite, and I think back all the years, I mean, Hogan got me into it, so I always have a soft spot for Hulkster, but from the minute he debuted on WWE Raw, when the countdown happened, it was Y2J, and he shows up and interrupts The Rock of all people. I mean, he has never looked back. So, as much as I'd love to say Hogan because he was my first, Jericho reinvents himself better than any other wrestler has ever done it. And what he's doing in AEW, I mean, at age, I think he's in his late 40s, early 50s. He's doing his best work of his career right now, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, what a fantastic answer. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, Steve.
Nope.
I know it's like having to choose between your favorite children. It's just a tough.
I can do. I can very easily do.
Let's talk about the wrestling scene in Chicago then, because I think it's got an incredible legacy, a fantastic history. When you look at some of the names, the Road Warriors, CM Punk, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Gary Hart, and I'm sure there's an incredible legacy there, Steve. And many would argue that Chicago could possibly be many people's favorite wrestling city in the US at the very least. Where would you stand on that argument regarding, and I know you're from Chicago, but where would you stand on that argument regarding Chicago as a wrestling town, as a wrestling city, and with some of the names that I mentioned there as well, possibly being the number one city in the US at least?
Well, I'll tell you this. That's an excellent point, and I think there's a lot of legitimacy to it, and it's for a number of reasons. I mean, obviously, icons like the Road Warriors, their legacy. Just talk to P.L. Myers for 5 minutes about the Road Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
They'll send chills down your spine. Windy City Pro Wrestling is, I don't think they get necessarily the love that they deserve. So many of the people that I work with now and a lot of people that are on TV started off in that particular promotion. And you hear about it to this day, talked about in almost every episode of the Power Hour. C-Red will make reference to Windy City Pro. And it really was the Halicon days of this business. There was a promotion called the LWF that's where CM Punk became CM Punk. And, if you ever want to go get a interesting interview, go find Billy Whack and talk to him for 5 minutes, because there isn't any human being in wrestling as entertaining as Billy Whack is. So Chicago does have a rich history. And another way you can prove that is, where does the WWE go 8 times a year? Allstate Arena in Chicago.
Yeah.
If it was a dome stadium that you could get 80,000 people into it, we would have WrestleMania here every other year. When you go to a WWE event, traffic is stopped in Rosemont. The line is wrapped around the building 3 times, and you hear wrestler after wrestler say, "There's no crowd like a Chicago crowd." That, my friend, is a fact.
Yeah, 100%. And do you think that the legacy and the history, the very strong wrestling history of Chicago lives on today in independent wrestling, let's say, in Chicago in 2021? Does that legacy and does that feeling with the fans probably and the general atmosphere, or maybe, the legacy of some of the wrestlers that we've mentioned, does that live on all these years later? There
is absolutely no doubt. There are thriving promotions that work out of Chicago as their hub, and in the area too. You go a little north of Illinois into Wisconsin, and there are a myriad into Indiana. So in the Midwest area, where Chicago being the central focus, there are promotions that are doing amazing work. Warrior Wrestling in Chicago Heights, not too far from my house. Principal Steve does amazing work there, and you see superstars of every kind. In fact, coming up in July, the Murder Hawk Monster is going to be taking on Frank the Clown and Robert Anthony at their next big event. Kylie Ray made her return to wrestling just a few weeks ago, and me and some of my friends were there. So the legacy of Chicago is alive and well. Zello Pro does events at baseball games, minor league baseball games. And I was watching some of the footage, and there were more people watching the damn wrestling match than the minor league baseball game, for God's sake. So, wrestling is strong in Chicago. It always will be. I work for many companies, in this area. I work in, Shabance, which is just over the border in Indiana, but they are, it's down south in Illinois. They do great work. I work at CSW. I'm the general manager there, working for the legend Steve Boz, who has been in this business 30 years. So, what happened in the past is definitely influencing what's happening right now, because all these great new talents are being trained by some of the best the area's had to offer. It's a really great place to work. I mean, the area's thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to touch more on CSW very, very soon, but we'll go back to some of the questions that have come in then, Steve. First of all, we got Rachel Cornell. I watched Chicagoland on Amazon last year. When will we be able to see Volume 2? So obviously the show that took place last night from Michigan City. When is that likely to drop? I know we spoke briefly off air. Could you give us kind of a ballpark figure?
First of all, Rachel, thank you for watching the first project. We greatly appreciate anybody that spends time with us via Amazon Prime. And, CCW will be back on Amazon Prime, Fight TV, Powered for TV, and a number of other streaming services. So it's coming and it'll be out there. If everything goes well, I would like to think that it shouldn't be more than a couple of weeks. Everything went flawlessly with production last night, so it's just a matter of getting it edited and putting it out there. So believe me, we will be hyping the absolute snot out of it when it's available. And I want to see it as badly as you do, except for the last 8 minutes, but I want to see it as badly as you do. So believe me, when it's out there, I will be sharing it every hour.
Oh, 100%. I can't wait myself. But Rachel, again, Chicago in the 50s and the 60s was huge for pro wrestling. I'd say Chicago as a history of when wrestling was more serious. Texas has to be up there as well, though. So an argument for Texas. Obviously, many might say New York. But I think, I every time I have this conversation with other people, I always keep coming back to Chicago.
Well, she's right about Texas. I mean, the legacy in Texas is second to none. And right now, you've got people like Booker T, and you've got people like Dustin Rhodes. They're doing big things down there. Promotions. Our own Elevate Pro, Brittany. She's working out of Texas now. So there are a lot of good things happening in Texas. But you're right, John. New York. Wrestling is everywhere, and it's thriving now like never before.
Absolutely. So let's have a quick look back. So another company that is very, very close to your heart and you're closely associated with, we spoke about it earlier, CSW, Chicago Style Wrestling. How did you first get involved with CSW then, Steve? And, another excellent promotion in the Chicago area, doing great things, putting on fantastic matches, amazing talent. But how did you first get involved?
That's a great question, too. I was working for a company called Global Professional Wrestling, and we were at a point where the company was starting to end for a year, and we weren't sure if it was going to come back in Southern Illinois or how it was going to happen. So when the November show was happening, I'm like, my God, I'm going to be out of a job in wrestling for the first time in a while, because Chicagoland Championship Wrestling hadn't been created at that point. And Steve Boz and TJ Steele are the Bruise Brothers. I talk about them often because they're fantastic and because they're CSW champions. But Steve Boz is CSW for all intents and purposes. And I had developed a friendship with him and his wife and TJ, who's his brother-in-law. And, they had always been really good to me. We had always had a really great chemistry. So as GPW was ending, they said, listen, in the next calendar year, we're going to bring you on to do some things. So, don't worry, you're going to get work again. And like I said, when you're in your late 40s and you're having, there's a very specific demographic that wants a guy like me to do what I do. So you have to find the right fit, because, I'm not in there taking a pounding every month. I'm not flying off the top rope. I don't have a legacy that dates back to the early days of Windy City Pro. So my opportunities, I have to take them when I can get them. So they gave me an opportunity to assume the role of general manager and, do some things in an administrative role. And I think since I've taken over as general manager, that company is soared to heights like it has never seen, in popularity that it's never seen before. I'm not being conceited there. I'm just saying our shows at CSW, we're working on our 4th consecutive sellout. So, CCW is selling out. Right. CSW is selling out. Now, I know I just happened to be on the same bill with Marche Rocket, so I'm sure he's got a little something to do with it, but it's all me, actually.
And transitioning from behind the commentary desk to, as you said, that more front of house authority figure as the general manager of CSW, how are you enjoying that change of role whenever you go to CSW? Because it is a transition, isn't it, for you? And probably different, might have taken you out of your comfort zone slightly as well. Well,
it's, I'll tell you what I do at CSW is some of my favorite stuff. Getting out there when you're addressing people on commentary, you're off to the side, you're talking to a camera. When you're a general manager, you have the mic and you're in the ring and you are controlling the room. And as general manager, I'm kind of your tour guide through the evening. I'm telling you what's coming. I have to come out and do, certain things when things don't go the way you plan. So I'm actively involved as a character in the show. Yes. Kind of the Vince McMahon, if you will, although I don't think my grapefruits are quite as big. But the jury's still out on that one. But it's great. I love it. I love coming out of the curtain at the beginning of each show, welcoming the crowd. I've got a new thing that I'm doing where I'm giving away my GM glasses. Every fan gets one, kind of in Bret Hart style now. So, we found a nice little niche there, and we're going to be back in Lake in the Hills in a few weeks. And it's called Fallout because I got dropped on my face. It didn't cause this. This happened last night, but I got dropped on my face at the last show, and the person that did the dropping is going to pay for it. That much I promise you. There we go. And Chicago style wrestling, you've proved that you're a man of many talents. General manager currently is CSW, but am I right in thinking that you have possibly taken on some booking or some promotional responsibilities over the years as well, Steve? The last 4 months of Global Professional Wrestling, our owner was out of town. He was setting up something in Southern Illinois and was not around for the day-to-day operations of the company. So me and another guy, took up the script writing and the booking and the things to make the show go. And, we would be doing crazy amounts of things on show day, a lot of expenses, a lot of chaos. If you're a promoter and a booker in this business, good luck to you, because it is hell on earth. Yeah. And the way John Bullard makes it look so easy, and the way the guys at CSW make it look so easy, is a testament to the fact that they're really professionals. And I'm just a fan who's middle-aged that got a lucky break, and people haven't caught up to the fact that he's faking it. Yeah, and one of our Facebook users just pointed out to me that you do the ring announcing for CSW as well, Steve. You know what? Our ring announcer's name is Wade Hunt, and Wade Hunt is a beautiful man with a just gorgeous mane of hair, and he's also the lead singer of a rock band. So Wade is a man of many talents, great hair not being the only one. And he is our ring announcer, but he has been absent lately with illness and family things, as it happens to all of us. So you know what? When there's a problem and when there's an absence, the powers that be look at me and say, hey, you don't have that much to do. Why don't you do something else?
Yeah, like I say, a man of many talents and not afraid to step up when needed. But let's talk about CSW and let's take a quick look at some of the talent and give a bit of a shout out to some of the top performers in CSW currently, because it's a real mix, isn't it, of experienced pros and rising stars in CSW. And it's certainly not a company to be sleeping on at the moment. It's kind of making waves and rising through the ranks, isn't it? CSW is a company to watch and keep your eyes on.
Indeed. Very astute. You have done your homework, young man. Very nicely done. Yes, CSW is one of the nicest mixes of young talent and veteran talent. And it works so well because the young talent we have are so very hungry to learn and succeed, but do it the right way. And our vets are the most giving of wisdom, and watching them. And that's one of my favorite parts of this whole thing is I sit there in the locker room for hours sometimes, and I just sit there and I listen and I watch as the vets pull the kids to the side and say, you know what, ask me anything. And they do. And you can see them learning and growing with the wisdom of the guys that are and girls that are passing on wisdom. And, it's really hard not to be one of the top companies when some of your talent is being featured on some of the most popular televised wrestling out there. Marche Rocket was just on the NWA pay-per-view. He's worked at Impact Wrestling. His legacy is well known. Sky Blue, our female champion, has been on AEW Dark, has been on NWA right now. She's on that show as we speak. And she's done things, all over the world. Big hit on WrestleMania weekend. So when you can hook your wagons to people that have national spotlight, it's impossible not to thrive. And all the young guys and gals see what these guys are doing, and Sky and Marche and all of our veterans, Vic Capri, champion Nick Brubaker, the absolute answer, Nick Cutler, Cypher. I'm thinking about all the guys and gals we have on our roster. They're larger than life characters when they come through that curtain, but when they're on the other side of the curtain, they're some of the nicest, most helpful, most compassionate people you'll ever meet. And the locker room is where if you're successful, your locker room is great. And I am fortunate the 3 places that I work have the strongest locker rooms I've ever seen. If you have a bad locker room, you aren't going to last very long in this business. But if you have a great locker room, you could really go places.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And Axelrico, we had Axel on the show a couple of weeks ago, and a hell of a character, a very, very promising young performer. The world is his oyster, and CSW is taken in places. Any thoughts on Axel?
Axelrico and I have a very tempestuous relationship. When Axel and I first met, Axel didn't like me. I wasn't very fond of Axel. He took my glasses. He broke my glasses. You don't break the GM's glasses. But over time, Axelrico has come to mean a lot to me. He saved my bacon last month, and he'll be rewarded this month. But the thing about him that is incredible is, for such a young performer, he is uber talented to the point where he could do anything you need him to do in a ring. And I mean absolutely anything. But number 2, he has an incredibly acute mind for this business. And there's a promotion that we do that the kids at the CSW training facility do called Proving Grounds. It's a YouTube series that you can watch on YouTube. And the creative director, essentially, of Proving Grounds is Axelrico. He also plays a number of characters, but we're not going to get into the nuts and bolts of it. But if you want entertaining young people that are doing things without being paid, just for the love of it, and deliver the goods every damn show, it's these guys. Now, you're not going to get necessarily wrestling, it's not going to be like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not going to be the most technically sound stuff, because these are students, but they're putting it all out there, and they're damn good at what they do. And they're still developing. This is a developmental program, and you can watch these kids learning as they go. So as they go from Proving Grounds to CSW, you're going to see the transition. It's kind of like our little NXT.
Yeah, and I've been very impressed with what I've seen, especially from Axelrico and Sky Blue, and she's doing some phenomenal things when she appears on AEW Dark. I think she's had an appearance on Dynamite as well, and of course part of the NWA roster. So that's one Chicago native that's got a very, very bright future out of Chicago and CSW, of course. But and now, everybody that's watching this right now would almost certainly be aware that you're all part of another fantastic double act. That with C Red and the Power Hour, which of course is hosted on the Jonas Podcasting Network. So please go and check it out if you haven't done so already. Tell us about you and your partnership with C Red. I've put you two over to the moon because I think your partnership and what you do on the Power Hour is absolutely hilarious and fantastic. You do interview some excellent independent talent from the Midwest area. And let's be honest, kind of around the States, you have interviewed stars. But tell us about that show. Tell us about C-Red and your partnership with C-Red and how that all got started, because I enjoy watching that every single week, Steve.
Well, thank you very much. Listen, anytime you do a show with a guy that has the talent and the experience of a C-Red, it's really, really easy. Again, I surround myself with people that make my life easier, and that's the truth. C-Red and I have been working together on and off since I started in this business 8 years ago. So I've worked at various promotions with him. My first memory of C-Red is, I was doing commentary for a company called Crash Tested Wrestling, and we're setting up for a show, and C-Red's kind of wandering through the building, as we're setting up. And, he's kind of singing some, 90s, 80s hip hop. And, he thinks that he's got a license on all of that stuff. That's only his music. Well, I have no problem jumping over there and singing right along rhythm. So after we did a very spirited rendition of En Vogue's Never Gonna Get It, complete with dancing, developed it. Again, that video is not available either, nor will it ever be. After something like that, you kind of, share an experience that neither of you want to admit, but you'll never forget. So, we've been friends since then, and I have never been very fond of him on commentary, and he has never been very fond of me as a wrestling manager. And that did not change last night at Grapple Masters 2. I'm not going to give the cat away, but I saw some things that made me very, very happy. And I think they'll make you all very, very happy too. The educated feet of Janai Kai are absolutely fantastic. I need a t-shirt that says educated feet. But C-Red as my partner, C-Red as my co-host, it happened. I was doing a show on the LRP network called Last Man Talking, and I was the host, and I brought in a partner, a friend of mine who was playing a character called the Macho Ghost. Does a really nice impression of Randy Savage, and on various talk shows that I've been doing over the last decade, he always comes in and does this bit for me on my shows. When I was at the school, I had a show called Devil's Radio, and he would call in at the last 15 minutes and we'd talk about nonsense, and he'd be, ooh, yeah, and all the Macho Man gimmick. And people, some people hate it, but some people love it, and more people loved it than hated it. So I brought him in to be my partner on Last Man Talking, and then COVID happened. And we were shut down, and we were doing everything via Zoom. Well, after a few months, when things started to open back up here in the States, I went back into the studio, but the Macho Ghost was not comfortable, living with elderly people, did not want to catch something and bring it home. So I was either left to do the show by myself, and I had just had C-Red on as a guest a few weeks before. So I talked to the guys at LRP, and I'm like, hey, why don't we bring Red in as the co-host? And they loved it. They thought it was a great idea. And he's been my partner ever since. And, we've had some pretty great fun times. And I can't imagine doing it with anybody else.
It really is fun. And if you haven't caught an episode of The Power Hour, go to wrestlingwithjonas.com, the Jonas Podcasting Network. Click on The Power Hour and check out every single episode from the very start up to the very latest. It's highly recommended and always makes me giggle. But you do have some great guests on there. So I can't wait for the next episode. But you've probably noticed, Steve, that I am representing the Chicago connection today.
Yes, I see that.
With my Chicago connection. Now, I've been... reliably informed by P.L. Myers that you are a member of the Chicago Connection. I believe you're one of the more recent additions, but my question to you is, can it be quite awkward when you're commentating and knowing you're a member of the Chicago Connection and there might be a member of that same faction in the ring? Is it hard to be impartial when you're commentating on a Chicago Connection match, Steve?
It would be hard to be impartial if I cared. Right. I'm impartial as hell. When the Connection showed up last night, I didn't hide my lineage. Never will. When you're a member of the Chicago Connection, especially number 23 in the city of Chicago means something. And the fact that I'm number 23, I may not be the GOAT yet, but you never know.
Yeah. And the Chicago, unfortunately, Jonathan Hudson was not in action yesterday against Chip Walker because he's out with an injury. But they are proclaiming him as a future contender, a rival for the CCW Championship. So maybe, who knows? We'll see how quick Jonathan Hudson makes his recovery. But my final question to you, and of course, at the top of the show, I mentioned this was episode 190 of the Wrestling with Johners podcast. And like I say, privileged to be speaking to you on this fantastic episode. But the first ever episode where I've interviewed a wrestling commentator, believe it or not. So if you've got any tips, any pearls of wisdom for anybody out there that might have an interest in possibly becoming a wrestling commentator or a commentator of some description in their lifetime, what tips, what advice would you give any budding commentators that might be watching or listening to this right now, Steve? And how could you kind of point them in the right direction and help them along?
Oh, very easy. Two things. There are two things you need to do. Two things. If you do these two things, you will be a success, not only as a commentator, but really at any job in professional wrestling. Number one, and this is the most important, have fun. It's professional freaking wrestling, and you get to do it. If you don't have fun with that, then, brother, you're in the wrong business. And why are you here? You got to have fun. I'm channeling my inner 14-year-old every time I walk out that curtain, every time I sit behind a microphone. Have fun. And number two, wrestling is storytelling. Tell a story. Every match that you'll ever call has a story behind it, and your job is to tell the fans why they should care about it. So be a good storyteller, have a great time, and you too can. If I can do it, anybody can do it. That's the God's honest truth. So if you want to do it and you see me doing it, and you're like, "Wow, he's not bad at it," then you can easily do it. So go do it.
There we go. And, start a podcast to get used to kind of using your voice and build a bit of an audience. Should have seen me on episode 1. Totally different. I wouldn't watch it back now. But
maybe you too can become part of the Johners broadcast family, because the Power Hour, as I say every week, is available exclusively on the Johners Podcast Network.
There we go. But Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure and a delight and a privilege to speak to you over the last 48 minutes, my friend. But before we let you go, an opportunity for you to throw out any social media plugs. Where can we find you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Where can we say hi, reach out to you, ask you any questions, or just get to know Steve Ahrendt a little bit better?
Well, I am available on Facebook. I'm at Steve Ahrendt. Just type in my name and there I am. Very simple. I'm on Twitter at Steve Ahrendt. That's pretty simple too. I'm on Instagram at Steve Arnett, Arnett, because that's what 80% of the people that employ me call me. It's not how you pronounce my name, but I figured, what the hell? If that's how they pronounce it, I might as well use it. So I'm on Instagram as well. And also YouTube, Steve Ahrendt as well. You can find all the episodes saved that, until they get to the Johners Network. I hide them there, so I have them for safekeeping. And, I got this little boo-boo right here. It will come to light why I'm bandaged and why I've got swelling and bruising around my eye. And to my assailants, I'll tell you this if you're watching. You did what you did, but you didn't finish the job. And in August, I'll be back, and maybe you won't.
Oh, that's an awesome way to finish this episode of Wrestling with Johners. A little word for the wise there to the assailants. Whoever did that to you last night, they will almost certainly get their comeuppance. And maybe the Chicago connection could be right behind you there, Steve. But Steve Ahrendt, it's been amazing speaking to you and a real privilege. And hopefully we can do this again sometime in the future. But for now, Steve Ahrendt, thank you very much.
Johners, thank you. John Scott, thank you. And to everybody that watched today, thank you. It's a privilege to have you sit there and listen to me.
There we go, guys. Catch you again soon. Bye-bye.